to this total rewriting and reconfiguring and re-explaining the facts out there, okay? It all comes because we have lost our way, because we've lost Torah. It's not rocket science. But one of the things, just to give you an example, how and to reclaim this and how at the end of the age, because I'll tell you, next year I am going to really start blowing the lid off a couple of things, okay? Because I've done enough reading research now. I'm pretty sure, you know, I've got my whole theory of everything. I mean, it's a free country, right? I can't even think, the scientist, there's a movie about the theory of everything could do it, and if a couple other people, it's a big thing, the theory of everything. So I'm going to do it too, but whatever. I was starting to touch on, I was going to touch on where we are in this thing, because there's whole Hebraic concepts of the Jubilees and the Shemitahs. The blood moons, people are beginning to understand about the heavens and how signs and seasons are given in the blood moons, and it's not just that, but that falling on the specific feasts, and there are eclipses in this thing. There's a whole little we're in this 2-year window of unbelievable signs in the heavens happening, okay, which is being unpacked. But also the concept of Shemitahs, Jubilees, and sabbatical years. A sabbatical year and a Shemitah is the same thing. It's a 7-year. God had ways of very orderly, tracking time, because this was always going to be a 6,000-year age. It was not hidden. It's very well understood, and we're there, and we're coming up next year, according to my husband's calculations. And this is one thing I want to say, you can get this book. We work in a Christian bookstore, so I'm going to say, you come in sometime, ask to see the Jubilee Scroll. Ask to get some of these books. This Defender Publishing, the Researcher's Library of Ancient Texts. This is great stuff. But if it's true, and most people who are really studying this line and are getting to within a year or two, everybody's coming to this conclusion, this understanding, the calendar, different ways God is restoring this understanding. We are in the zone. We are in the zone. Things are being unpacked. Things are being put right back in there and back in place, and we're beginning to understand. So if next year is truly the 100th Jubilee, what that means, Christian, I mean, the fact that we don't even know what it means. Oh my gosh. Talk about the elect being deceived, okay? Now, God's got a plan, so I'm not too worried, but this whole idea brought up the idea of the priesthood. What I want to talk about is in Romans, and I want to just do a little Bible teaching here. Okay, there's a little part in Romans, and I mean Hebrews, the book of Hebrews, which if you just even read the first verse, which is written to the scattered, hold on, I got my verses mixed up here. All right, in the book of Hebrews, in chapter 6, chapter 7, okay, Melchizedek, the priest. There's always been this who is this guy, Melchizedek? Okay, most Christians, and you can go back thousands, we're into 2,000 years of history, hundreds of years. There's all this different talk about who is Melchizedek. Well, if you would read the broader canon, the broader books, the larger body of understanding and works that are out there, it would be very evident. This is such an interesting and important understanding. Why would Jesus, our high priest, be of the order of Melchizedek? And what does that mean? And this is where understanding our Jewish roots, understanding the history, how this thing is played out from Adam, we would have this understanding. I'm going to read from the book of Jasher. There's a quote in there. But Shem who was the son of Noah. Okay, so the 3 boys got off the boat, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And I've been through this, and I've done teaching this understanding. Shem became the firstborn son. Now, what does that mean? That's not just mean he was genetic, because he wasn't the genetic firstborn. but he received the firstborn blessings. So what does that mean? What that means is he became for the people of the world, the representative of God. He became the high priest in the earth to Yahweh. Okay? The order of priests, Enoch was a priest in the order of Melchizedek. Okay, now, so let me just read you Jasher, okay, book of Jasher. Which, again, let me just say this because I've said it many times, Jasher is a historical book. It is mentioned twice in the Old Testament. It is a book that would have composed all of the history of this line of people from Adam to Abraham. Okay? So it's just loaded out with details and a lot of filling in of the storylines that we only get 1 or 2 verses in the Bible. Well, they never thought we were going to lose all this information. I'm sure the original editors of these didn't think that we were going to lose this and not know who Melchizedek was, okay? Because Melchizedek, many things that you need to understand about the Bible, these people have many names. They have many acronyms. An acronym is like NASA, which I don't even know what it stands for. Give me OPEC, something petroleum producing nations. Oh my gosh, I'm so bad. I can't even think of these. NASA, what is it?
Aeronautic and Space
Organization. Say it again. National Space and right. Well, whatever. Okay, these are called acronyms. So when you take the first letter of a long, and you just kind of give it this shortened name. So NASA. When I say NASA, everybody knows what I'm talking about, okay? That's a lot of what's in the Bible, these things. They give them these names so that he was the king of Salem, the king of righteousness. Well, that's a lot to put in. Melchizedek means king. Melech means king. Salem. He was the king of Salem, okay? Melchizedek, okay? Now, the traditional Judaic understanding was that the figure named Melchizedek was Shem, and that the priesthood after the flood was centered at Jerusalem. Now, I'm going to really start explaining this priesthood business because, see, we're going to be priests of God, to God, in the millennium. It's a very specific role. It's pretty exciting. Okay, but it's been with us. This is nothing new. It's not like God's reinventing something here. This understanding has been lost to us, but it's going to be restored. All right, so let me just start again. The traditional Judaic understanding is that the figure named Melchizedek or Adonozek was Shem. That the priesthood after the flood was centered at Jerusalem, Salem. Okay, you got to look at your words, and you got to, in the Hebrew especially, pull them apart. Look at him. Salem. He was the king of Salem. This is supported by the book of Jasher, which states, and Adonizek, king of Jerusalem, the same was Shem. It says right there, the same was Shem. Went out with his men to meet Abram and his people with bread and wine. Here's Jesus, the high priest, our new high priest, having a meal with his disciples with bread and wine. See, these things we have got to get back that there is always context. It's the same, it's going down through a line. There's a deep understanding, bread and wine. These are not animal sacrifices, okay? This is bread and this is wine. And they remained together in the valley of Melech. And Adonizek blessed Abram, and Abram gave him 1/10 from all that he had brought from the spoil of his enemies, for Adonizek was a priest. The word before, you could say in the Hebrew, is to. You always have to check your translation. Is a priest to God. Now that is Jasher, the book of Jasher. You want to look this up, the book of Jasher, chapter 16, verses 11 and 12. So let me read this again. This book of Jasher, it was kept as esoteric writings by the Talmudic sages all through the last 2,000 years. You know, praise God, they kept this stuff. It surfaced in the 16th century. It's been coming back and coming back. You know, I mean, through scholarship, they've been able to narrow it down. This is the best we have today, and I am not at all worried about scribal transmission. When you can get the book of Isaiah, that's 11 100 years apart that is absolutely identical. I don't go to sleep at night worrying about scribal transmission. That is a straw dog argument. The enemy is trying to tell you, oh, they can't trail. It's just written by men and it changes every generation. No, it does not. So just take that lie and throw it out. You'll sleep a lot better at night. So the book of Jasher tells us right here that Shem was Melchizedek. And this is a priesthood that goes back to Adam. Adam was a priest. If you really read it, Adam was sacrificing. He was a priest to God. He taught his sons. Why do you think this whole story, this is why I got to unpack all this. Cain and Abel bring sacrifices to God. I mean, where does it come from? These things don't come out of nowhere, all right? There is deep tradition already established from the Garden of Eden on. These boys were doing something. The priesthood was being passed on. And the firstborn, but there's a lot here, okay? See, this is when they say apocryphal. There's just so much understanding that's being passed on in a couple verses. If you don't have the bigger backdrop, you really have no clue what's going on, and it's really kind of meaningless, okay? So why would he accept Abel's offering of sheep and not Cain's of the land? I mean, it doesn't make sense. Well, we're going to make sense of this stuff, okay? It's time for all the knowledge and information to come together so we can put it together and we can make sense of it all. Now, so what I want to do is unpack what's the difference? Now, there's another whole priesthood, the Zadok priesthood, the Levites. So then you fast forward up to Moses, and then through Aaron, God establishes a whole new priesthood. So you have, and this is when Jesus comes, he's not a priest out of the line of Aaron. He's this other priest out of this line of Melchizedek. Okay, so let's unpack, and I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I kind of want to whet your appetite. This can all fit. We can understand all this. And why, when you read Hebrews, these people who knew this, okay? This was common knowledge. This is their history. They know this. Why they were able to understand and try to explain why Jesus is the high priest now, because the whole point is the Levitical priesthood was a priesthood God called out for a nation. A nation. Shem, or Adam, this priesthood ministers to all. See, Jesus is the Messiah for all. Remember that? He held out his old arms and he died for the whole world. You got to understand how this story has had to be played out at different times, because we're in a war, you use different strategies. By the time it got to Moses, God changed it up. He called out a nation. He made a nation of priests. He gave them a lot of the deep hidden understandings and mysteries, things that were going on behind the veil and all this kind of stuff, and they kept it, this priesthood and this high priest, and then the history of what happens to that. So by the time you get to Jesus, it's totally, but it doesn't even matter, because, he's come and now he is the sacrificial lamb and the whole bit. He put an end, this is why he ended the Levitical order of the priesthood. He put an end, hear me, he put to sacrifice and offerings. That's what Daniel says. That's what he did. He was the sacrificial lamb. He did put an end to the need totally for a temple to be doing animal and sacrifices, because now he did it and it's done. That part, see, you guys, this is why Jesus didn't throw out the whole. He fulfilled that part of the prophecies that needed to be fulfilled about a sacrificial lamb. And that's just that part, okay, which you can unpack and understand. And that's what the priesthood and their ritual were they doing. They were playing this out, the Day of Atonement, what it meant. Oh, this stuff, it's so exciting. It's so beautiful. It's so pure. It's so true. It's so Torah. And we're going to get there and methodically go through all this stuff. So, if you want to have a heads up for the next time, read Hebrews 7, read Hebrews 8, And then we're going to unpack it, and we're going to explain about how Christ sacrificed up to 9 and 10 once and for all because of the difference in these two bloodline. That's another very important point, bloodline priesthoods, okay? Now, the last thing I want to say, so we can understand this stuff. Well, the reason to have a larger worldview is so that you cannot be subject to super departmentalization and specialization, which is a detriment to wisdom, which is to acquire knowledge and understand on a broad scale. Solomon was the wisest man that ever lived. Well, because he was a total Renaissance man. They say he had more understanding of the flora and the fauna world, like the natural world, so that he could make all these parables. He could get, by studying the natural world, he could get the deeper meanings just by studying. And that's why Paul said that every man will be without excuse because of the creation. I don't care if you never heard of Jesus. Just look at creation. Just sit down in the garden and just look at it, study, think about it. Let your mind ponder it, and the Holy Spirit will begin to speak to you, and you will begin to get an understanding of this unbelievable Yahweh Elohim Creator God. As Paul said, don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it. You never heard Torah. Hey, God's got many ways. Just look at creation. The intelligent design. But anyways, that's another thing. Now what I want to talk about is Isaiah. Okay, now why is Isaiah the prince of prophets? Because if anything I want to, if you're a leader, if you perceive yourself to be a shepherd, an elder, a presbyter, whatever, you're a bishop, an apostle, a prophet, whatever. If you don't have a good Torah understanding, forget it. You just don't even come to the table, okay? This is why sometimes the Jews, they laugh at us. They're like, these Christians, what? That's why, one of the reasons the two houses, House of Judah and House of, have not been able to come together. And I'm going to end with this quote, so let me find it before I forget. Because they read some of the stuff we say, and they're like, where do these people get this stuff? So funny. Anyways, Isaiah, they call him the prince of prophets, okay? He was the prince, the premier, meaning like he was just, the guy just was the prince of prophets. He had more prophecies than anyone else, and he had such a deep understanding, and he is one of the most messianic books. I mean, we got about Jesus. Okay, everybody studies and talk about Isaiah, but why? First of all, he had a great education. He was of the upper class. He was royalty, so yes, he did have access, and even at that time, you gotta have a level playing field, but it just happens all the time that when you don't keep Shemitahs and Jubilees and when you always get into the haves and the have-nots kind of classes, whole segments of society get shut out. But Isaiah was born into the upper crust, so he had access to great education. But do you know that now it says most of his chapters will start out with the oracle of the Lord, that came to Isaiah, which is really a word burden. Okay, so oracle is kind of a bad translation because I had these burdens. He would get these burdens from the Lord, which means to lift, or comes the root word to carry. He was carrying this deep understanding, and he could just sort of look down the road and see where it was going. How could he do that? Okay, and this is what the sage, because he was so well read and well versed, and not only in his own Torah history, but in the histories of the world. He knew every single people group on the planet, where their roots were, where they came from, who their founders were, what their story was, and where they were going, because he could put it together. So much revelation is not really, we think God just downloads to people. No, he doesn't. You do your homework, and God will give you the answers. He'll put it together for you. He will give you spiritual wisdom and revelation knowledge, which is an understanding of how to put the pieces together. Now, there is hidden mysteries, but that's another thing. But what I wanted to start with is, so these burdens, which is really, you could almost say, to lift or to carry, to bear, he was the bearer of bad news. I mean, really, that's kind of where they get it from. He prophesied to how many nations? I want to tell you this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, I think 18, I counted out at least 18 nations, people groups accurately. To this day, people are still reading Isaiah and saying, man, how'd that guy nail it? Okay, how did he do it? Okay, so he has prophecies that are accurate to the house of Judah. And this, he says it right there, read Isaiah, get it, house of Judah and house of Israel, and what that means. I have whole YouTubes on that. Babylon, okay? See, now if we had Isaiah's under Babylon, we wouldn't have any problem understanding who Babylon is today. Oh my gosh, this is so funny. I wouldn't even go there. We're all over the place because we don't understand biblical Babylon, which is biblical Babylon, people. Okay, Assyria. Okay, so Babylon is southern Iraq, was the southern part. Assyria was the northern. Okay, so Iraq today is really made of the kingdoms of ancient Babylon and ancient Assyria. It falls over a little bit into Syria and a little bit into Iran. They're that geographic area. Philistia, Moab, and the Ammonites. Now Moab, you got to know who is Moab. Moab is one of the sons, the people groups that were started by Lot. The father Lot, who Abraham had to go after, which is the whole point of why when Shem met him, the whole story, by his daughter, okay? And then the Ammonites, he had 2 daughters and they fathered that's a whole story. So you got to know who these people are. You can't just breeze past this. Syria, these people groups are still with us today. A lot of these, Ethiopia, Egypt, the wilderness of the sea. Isn't that it? If we could unpack the wilderness, and I didn't have time to really look at the translations, what words were in the Hebrew to get that translation, but Arabia, Kedar, the Valley of Vision. The Valley of Vision, even if you read in the context, you will get is Jerusalem. That's another acronym of the Valley of Vision, the city of Jerusalem. Tyre, the Chaldeans, Edom, the Edomites, the descendants of Esau. Esau was the brother of Jacob. The Medes and the Persians. Elam, who is Elam, and who is Media. See, you have to, the fact that Isaiah it'd be like me today, just talking, just straight out, and I could name any, the Chinese, all these people groups, and I could know their story. I would know their religion, I would know their geography, I would know their national input, or their GNP, their place in the bigger picture of the world, what their legacy was. He knew this stuff. He knew everything about these people groups, okay? And their relation to Israel, to the chosen people at this point, Isaiah, especially Babylon and Assyria, which Babylon was just about ready to take them out, which they did, okay? And he was able to accurately, through his knowledge, in meditation and understanding with the Lord, and the Lord would show him, hey, Isaiah, I'll show you something, and open up a window, just totally open up a window in the linear thing of time, show him stuff. But what I'm trying to tell you is in all the prophets, in the priests and the scribes that wrote they weren't men just sitting on a lotus field. They were men and women of God, because you got Judith in there, and there's many, and you got Judith, and you have Deborah, a lot of people, Mary. So, oh my gosh, so much we've lost these people who knew what was going on, okay? They weren't playing, I hate to say this, video games, okay? We have a culture today where entertainment has become the premium pastime, where in ages past, that wasn't the fact. So anyways, we're going to unpack this some more. I'm going to start to unpack a lot of these things next year. It's been a great year for me in terms of just walking with the Lord, growing in wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And I wish it for anybody. It's free. This is the age of the restoration of all things. We're coming up on a pivotal time. I'll tell you, people, and I'll tell you a little thing. Jesus said, those that love me, obey me. If you're not keeping Torah, and you better start doing a checkup from the neck up. If you are not keeping the categories of the 10 Commandments, the Torah in your life, and you think you're okay with God, you are a 100% deceived person. I'm sorry, I didn't write the book. He expects his people, his righteous remnant, to obey him. And if you don't even know what you're supposed to obey, if you've never really delved in with the Lord and sought it out, it's like, Houston, we have a problem. So, God bless you. Happy New Year. May shalom and peace in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach